Good morning and welcome back to Plannercraft. I'm Natalie and today I'm going to be doing a little bit of watercolour for a frame. So I've pulled out a couple of frames and these are from IKEA and they're reasonable to say the least. And those of you that have been watching know that I'm planning to do a bit of a picture wall in my hall with the Chocolate Baroque House stamps. So I've got one out so that we can use it as a measure. I'm going to use that as a guide. And good morning Sharon, morning Linda. No, Ian's not in the room today. He's working already, so his shifts are all over the shop, so sometimes he can be here, but this time he can't. Today is definitely he can't. He's not feeling too good either, poor thing. So I have squid ink, which is good for both watercolour and alcohol colouring. And I have the Derwent Line and Wash set. So this comes with a fine liner pen as well, and it's intended to be for urban sketches. But I thought, given that we're doing lots of architecture, this is probably the perfect palette for us to go with. So some of the colours in here are ink tints, a couple of them are graphite tints, and then we even have a pastels one in there too. Okay. Paper wise, today I'm going to be using the Strathmore mixed media. Now usually when I do watercolour on stream you'll see that I use the all media paper from Paper Mill Direct, but this one has a smoother surface, which means that if you're working with detailed stamps you'll get a bit more of that detail through. Okay, let's just get a sheet out. Now this is a little bit more expensive than your average, but as it's going to be something that's going up on the wall, it's worth spending that little extra. Who's commenting his Plannercraft? I don't know whether that's Tracy or Deb. Or it might be Ian sneaking one in. Okay, so I'm going to take my paper and I'm going to line it up against this side here. And I'm going to do a little mark at this edge here and another little one just there. Now we have 2 landscape and 2 portrait for this frame. So let's just do another little mark there and another little mark there. I'm going to go to the opposite corner now, and what I would say is when you're doing this, any bits that you get left over like strips and things, don't throw them away because they are that little bit more expensive. You can use them to instead create your sentiment strips with, especially if you're going to be using things like sprays to tone them in. So we're going to have this section here that's going to be left over and a strip down here. So you'll notice that when I bought my frames in I had 2 different sizes. So the larger size you can work with any old how. But I wanted to focus more on these smaller ones because they can be a bit tricky to work with when you're working with larger stamps. And I wanted to talk about a few of the ways that we can work with them. So let's get my trimmer and we can trim those out. Hi Deb. And morning Delcy. So I'm going to line up my pencil marks from the cut line of my trimmer. And I can pop that down there. And next one. So there's our one strip that we're going to use for our sentiments. Now I'm going to line up my pencil mark again. So what did you all get up to yesterday? There we go. So as I said, with these waste pieces, we're going to set those to one side for sentiment strips. So that if we need to do a double impression. And let's start off with one of our portrait pieces. And let's go for our townhouse. So this one's really fun to colour. So I'm just going to line that up onto my card. Press that down. Now bear in mind that in your frame you're actually going to have a certain amount hidden on these edges. So if you are going to do things like skies, remember to take them right to the edge so you don't get like a weird halo around your frame. Let's get my squid ink. And if anybody's watching who hasn't said hi, don't be afraid to. We're all lovely. We don't bite. I thought it'd be nice to do some watercolour for a change. And if you get bits that miss, don't worry, that's why we use this platform. So we can go back and add a bit more ink. The squid ink doesn't take long to dry, which is another benefit of using it. There we go. Just going to apply a little bit more pressure just about there. And there's our impression. So you notice where I've stamped is slightly off to one side, so let's show you how we can work with that. I'm going to clean my stamp first because I'll try and be good. So with rubber stamps I just tend to use water and a flannel so that it gets into all those little nooks and crannies. I use a bamboo cloth on clear stamps so it's a little bit more gentle. So I'm going to pull out my little stamps. So these are English cottages, townhouses and village life, and they are a little bit smaller. Now my main thing for using these is for our landscape pieces shortly, but they do have some lovely trees that kind of match. So it's going to make our house look huge, but I don't think it's going to look terribly out of place. Now I'm going to pop my magnets onto my card, but you'll notice I'm trying to stay clear of this edge here. Then I'm going to get some masking tape. Now when I say masking tape, this is like blending tape rather than the masking tape you do for your walls if you're doing some painting. So I'm going to stick that bit there, and then I'm going to tear down this piece here and pop that over the edges of our little greenery just there. Then we can pop on our tree, and what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to bring it up above where the bottom of our house is, so we're actually going to send it backwards. And we'll stamp that with the same squid ink. So then hopefully when we remove the masking, it's going to look like it's all one image. Oh, housework day, Delcy. That tends to be what weekends are for us. We try and be good and have downtime, but it doesn't really happen. And let's get on to our colouring. So take up a little bit of masking tape and ta-da! Now where we've got little bits like this where it's cut off the edge, you're going to use your watercolour to fill in. So at least with these being little, you can easily see the palette at the same time. If you want me to zoom in, do let me know. I have a little water pot, and I'm going to start with a fairly large brush, which is number 8. So those of you that have done our watercolour class and got the brushes for those, I'm going to use those brushes. So there's a little bit of fluff just there, so let's just get that out of the way because we don't want to smudge anything. I'm going to start off with my greenery, and you'll see here which are my two kind of go-tos for that. So we have meadow, which is this greeny colour, and we have artichoke, which is the paler pastel colour. Now meadow is a graphy tint. So what that means is there's actually graphite suspended in the watercolour, which means that if you don't like the colour that it goes on, if it's just a bit too dark, once it's dry you can go back over with an eraser and it will actually lift that graphite back out. It's a really good way of adding highlights as well. And I'm just going to dot in the dark colour first. And like I said, make sure that you start to fill in this space here. I'm going to do the same on this bit around here. And you could even do another little bit just there. I'm going to go back into my water. grab my flannel. So I'm just going to soften this up with just some water. So the graphic tints are pretty much like a normal watercolour in that they are going to remain water reactive, so you don't have to rush too much. There we go. And we have our first little tree. So let's go to our artichoke next so you can see that colour. So it's like a kind of pale green, but it's opaque. So this becomes a bit more interesting to paint with on our lines. So it's going to knock it back. It's not going to remove it completely, but it's a really good idea to use something like this when we want to push our outlines backwards into the background. So let's go over here. I'm going to use that into the darker sections. So we really want this to be pushed right back. Make a bit more colour when your brush starts to get a little dry. And I'm just going around those areas that are darkest to start with. And then we can introduce some more of that meadow colour, where we're showing that the sunlight is hitting, because that meadow is much warmer and it will feel like the sun's hitting bits of this dark tree that's in the distance. Let's pick a bit more choke. So if you have the pastels palette and you don't have this one, you can find it in there too. Okay. And we're getting there. So if there's anywhere that still looks like it's black ink, you can use that to soften by applying a little bit more of that colour. Give your brush a really good wash at this point. The pastel colours are they're based on gouache, so they do have a bit of a chalkier residue to them. So back to our meadow, and I'm going to water that down quite a bit, because we're not going for depth of colour here, we're just literally going for tone. I'm going to just blob that, technical term, into the sections where we haven't got our artichoke. I'm going to come back and tidy that up in a minute with just water. So there's a little bit just there that goes off. So like I said, don't be tempted to leave like a halo around. Okay, now we can go back in and we can push that up to the edges. If you get a little bit too much water, you can always blot your brush onto a cloth and then pull that up. So you can see I've gone really soft. I'm just going to use what's on my brush now to fill in any little sections. Move to the next section and again push it up to the edge of that outline. And if there's any hard lines between the two colours, just use your brush to mix the two together. So somewhere like this where you've got this line here, you're going to take that over the top. So for those of you that didn't see Monday's stream, we're going to be doing a CM and DX week next week. So I thought it would be good this week to do a little bit different with the watercolour. Means next week's going to be full on scan and cut. Okay, so there's our greenery done, and now everything else is shades of brown. So I always think of townhouses like this as being red brick. So I'm going to go for poppy red, which is this bright red here. Add a bit more water to it. I'm going to go for natural brown. Again, a bit more water. Let's pick up a bit more of that red. And give my brush clean before I go into the next colour. I'm going to get some mango. So this is going to be your flat all over colour, and then we can go back in and do shadows after. So all those colours are Inktense colours, which means that once they're dry, they're permanent. So really good to use when you're doing things like this where you're going to be wanting to glaze and layer over the top. I'm going to miss out these little brick details that are just under the roof. You can use the point of your brush to get into your details, so don't think you have to keep changing brush sizes. It's just all about the control that you have in your hand, so you're going to use a really light touch. Okay, there we go. So it's going to come down the side here and pull that colour down through the middle of these windows and down the edge. And I've done all that on pretty much one load of the brush. So I'm just going to tidy up at the top. And use what I've picked up to carry on down here. Yeah, that's Ian in the background. He's being very noisy today. I think he's having microphone issues. So he's having fun and games with his bad head. It's not good. I swear technology knows when you're not well and goes, right, today's the day to play you up. But yes, going back to the Inktense 24, yeah, it's definitely a good set to have. If you're on a tight budget and you can only get 12 rather than 24, I actually prefer set 2 to set 1 in terms of the colour choices. So if you're looking at going for that option. Now I'm going to go back into that same wash and I'm going to pick out some of those bricks. So first of all, make sure that your paint is dry. You can do that by tipping it towards a light source. If it's shiny, it's still wet. If it's matte, it's dry. And I'm just going to pick out individual little bricks like this at the very tip of my brush. I'm going to do a little bit just under that section there, and just under there too. So this isn't necessarily about shading, it's to a certain extent it's doing a little bit of tidying. If you have tide marks in your paint, don't worry, it's going to add to the effect because you don't want it to be perfect, honest. So I'm not doing all the bricks, I'm just picking some out, and then when we do our shade colour in a minute, I'm also going to use some of that on random bricks too, so that it looks like our bricks are old and not perfectly laid, like they were built yesterday. Just going to add a bit more colour under there, because as we got down towards the bottom it was starting to get a little bit paler, so we can actually do a few more of the bricks, like so, and it's going to look like we're darkening that bottom section, and all we're actually doing is just applying a few dots of paint. Okay. going to give my brush a wash. And in your palette you have some lovely bluey greys, and this is your opportunity to use them. So I'm going to go for a bit of Payne's grey, I believe, but my palette did have a bit of an oopsie, so you never know. And a tiny spot of the ocean blue, and mainly Payne's grey. I'm going to add some water, because we only want it to be a glaze. And if the colour's dry in your palette, don't worry, you can always re-wet them because it's on plastic. I'm going to take that shadow colour and I'm going to come under the roof, like so. Now if you're painting upside down like I am, to make life easier for you, just bear in mind that your shadows are going to also appear to be upside down to you as well. So you should have something that looks like that. We're then going to do the same wherever there is going to be a shadow beneath an object. So something like these little brick sections here will have a faint shadow underneath. Now if you want to swap to a finer brush, that's fine at this point, because we're going to be doing lots of intricate detail. I don't mind using up what's on my brush though. So next section, we've got this little balcony just here. I'm going to take that colour across underneath, even though we haven't painted it yet, because so long as we stick to our ink tenses, it's going to be translucent, so you can see the painting underneath. And underneath the window ledges. Yep, the house stamp is really nice. All the house stamps that I'm using today are from Chocolate Baroque. This is the, let me get the right one, she says, and she hasn't labelled them yet. Had to change the folder that these were in, so I've got to redo my labels. I think this might be Posh House or Townhouse. The set that I'm using at the moment is the Line and Wash set, which has a few different bits and pieces from the other palettes. So if you're an urban sketcher, you only need to take one palette with you, basically, is the idea. It comes with a fine liner too, so if you're feeling really confident, you can go and take it out and about and do some urban sketching, which is something I'd like to do more of, hence I got the palette. But in the current circumstances, it's a little bit harder. And just popping a little bit more of that shade colour underneath. So now we can see that our window ledges are starting to pop forward, and we have all these lovely windows to do. So this is where I'm going to change my colour slightly, start a new bit of our palette, and I've just used what's literally on my paintbrush, so hence it's coming out this lovely blue. And I'm going to add to that a load more blue. And this is going to look really dark. Try not to panic, because we're going to add lots of water to it. And that's so that we can eventually use the same colour for these windows too. I'm just dragging my paintbrush on that edge to try and get most of that water out. Now I'm going to come in here, and you can see when I put it on paper how much paler it is to how it looks in there. Now I'm using the shading that's in the stamp itself to kind of inspire where my shading's going. And I'm doing the same technique as before, so applying the colour first, and then you can always blend it out after if you want to. So the harsher the line between the shadow and the highlight, the more shiny an object's going to look. So I don't think these houses would have very clean windows up here, it's just too high. So we can knock those back a bit in a bit. I'm going to do the same for these little windows up here. Now these little panel ones are really fun to do. So I would change to a little detailer like this. So it's really fine point. I can just pick up some colour. And we can go in and do these tiny, tiny little panes of glass. There we go. I'm going to also re-wet my brush. I'm just going to go back into our shadow colour. I'm just going to do these little panels in here. There we go. And more of that colour just across that bottommost section, so we're just pushing it back that little bit further. Now, I'm going to go back to my bigger brush, give it a good clean again. And I'm just going to soften this edge. So I won't lift it all the way out, but just so it doesn't look quite so stark. Helps your window frames pop too. So I thought tomorrow we could do the landscape ones, which would be really fun because they are tiny, tiny little houses. I always find it's easier to paint bigger and then work your way smaller. You get a bit more margin for error in the larger houses. And don't forget to also do the windows up here. And there's one I've just missed, I've just realised. So I'm going to go back in with my detailer to add that bit of paint to the top. And let's get a bit of that blue, because it's got a bit of a shadow on it as well, so it won't hurt to have both. Give that a quick clean. And again, I'm just going to blend that colour out and round. Like so. And I'm going to use what's left in my brush to do these little windows down here. And then we need to decide what colour our front door is going to be. So if you want to do it just white, and you're wondering how to make it look like it's white, you're just going to go back to your shadow colour. And I'm going to use my detailer brush for this one. I'm going to pull out a bit of our shadow colour. I'm going to come down inside my panel and across the top. So inside and top. Now I will hold this up close to the camera so you can see as well. Again, I'm going to come underneath the plinth of our door and put some more shadow there. That's going to push our door back in. I'm going to do the same down this edge too, and also down this one. So again, we've got our white door that's being pushed back. A bit more water on the brush because our paint is starting to dry a little. I'm going to come in and I'm going to do a second layer across the top and down the one side, so you're going the opposite side to the side shaded on your panel, like so. And that's going to push that back in. I'm also going to do the same underneath this little archway here, because this will be set back into the bricks. Like so. Okay, so now we can work on this house. Now this is going to push back a little, which means that we want to go a little bit cooler. So I'm going to take our shadow colour here, pick some up, and put it into our brick colour. Now if it didn't make enough of a difference, just grab a little bit more. And you want it so that it pushes that brick colour back, but you don't want to go too grey, so let's top it back up with a bit brown. And drop in a touch of the red. So we're getting that kind of cooler colour. So you're almost taking away that mango, and when we then come in here, hopefully you'll see that it's got a cooler tone to this one. And again, we can still do that same shading technique over the top. So what I'll do tomorrow is I'll show you this piece in the frame as well, because you want to let your watercolours dry completely before you try and frame them. So I hope you enjoy the colouring streams as much as I do doing them. I do love to colour. I love to paint too. Don't always get much chance for doing that at the moment. But if you get a chance to go and paint outdoors in the strangest of places, I have to say It's really worth doing. Challenge yourself, because you'll be surprised what you get in return. The one day we went out to Alton Towers, as you do. And we had gone as a big blended family. And I'm not one for riding the roller coasters at all. So I set myself up in the cafe at Alton Towers, and I painted the roller coasters. And at the time they had a photographer going around who was doing marketing for the park, and I had a lovely long chat with the photographer from Alton Towers, and they shared out my artwork, which was really cool. So if you go right back on Alton Towers, eventually you'll come to my artwork. Now I'm going back a few years, but there's no reason why you can't do something similar, even if it's just go to the local park and do a bit of painting there. You'll be surprised who comes and chats to you and asks you about your work. There we go. So being cooler, it's going to recede backwards a little. That's a very odd conversation to have with your daughter about the pasties. So Carol's asked if we could do a drawing class, and it's something that's been on my to-do list for the entirety of this year, I have to say. And it's just finding a time that we can be consistent with because of Ian's shifts and things that's holding me back, really. But as soon as we can work that out, probably come winter again, to be honest, because it's a bit easier in winter. Don't really want to go out and do anything. So I'm using my shadow colour, and to that I'm adding some of the natural brown, and that's going to just do this little section of roof up here. We have a nice slate roof. I'm going to add a little bit more water to that colour, just a little, not too much. And I'm going to use that along our plinth area here. And you notice I'm not going to try and paint the steps as such yet. I'm just taking that colour all the way over. Like so. I'm going to clean my brush, and I'm going to soften this bottom edge. And also, remember how I said don't leave a white edge around here? I'm just going to fade that out. I'm going to pick up a little bit in the meadow as well and start to drop that into it. Again, back into the water, and we can add a bit of nondescript greenness. And we're going to get that nice and soft and take away those puddles of water at the top. like so. Let's very quickly do the bark of the tree, like that. And down in this bottom section here, we've got a bit of greenery that recedes back. So, a bit of meadow and a bit of the artichoke. And I'm going to mix the two together. Like that. And we're nearly done for today. I did think for a while about whether to put a sky in these or not. And I think for what I'm doing, I'm not going to put a sky in. But if you want to, you can do. And sometimes you can even find that it's easier to put your sky in before you do any of your colouring. Saves you having to worry about cutting it in. Especially if you're going for a paler sky. And then you can always lift it back out over the houses. Just going to drop a little bit more blue into that. Just start to get a little bit pale. We don't want it too pale too quickly. Good girl. Now the other trick you can do to make this house recede backwards is to just put a line of shadow up there. Just going to pop a little bit of that blue colour into each of these archways as well. And there we go. Let's just do a little bit of shading onto our door. Push that back in. Another layer to the top and to the side. So, to do this little bit of shading that one back here, I'm just going to come along this edge, like so. Underneath the roof. Down this side here. And the end. Underneath. Nearly. Don't want the blue, we want the shadow. Put the blue at this point, it's going to look awfully weird. And I'm just going to add a little bit of that dark grey colour to some of the steps so that you can see that there is a distinction between the different levels. There we go. Not bad if I do say so myself. And let's just finish up our woodwork at the top of the roof. So I'm going to go into the blue. Let's just do this section up here. Now I'm going to knock this back because I just want it to look like we've got a slight overhang of our tiles. And I can do a little bit just around the side and underneath of our little orbs, like so. And we can just tidy up with a little bit of shading to our white section, and it's just going to make it look a little bit more realistic. Pick up a bit of our brick colour. Now this is the brick colour from over here, so you're differentiating again, and like so. I'm going to do the same to these little bricks here, so they get pushed back in. Same to our archway down here. Let's pick up a bit more colour, it's getting a bit too pale. It's better. And there we go. Ta-da! Yep, the house stamps are so addictive, I have to say. So I've got the full collection from the last release to do. So I'm going to end up getting a load more frames yet, because I've kind of pinched one for the office. And then I got the country life size sort of stamps, because I then realised that, hang on, some of them are landscape. So it's like, I'm going to have to get some to fit. That's my excuse, and I'm sticking to it. So tomorrow we'll do a landscape one so that you can see that as well. And thank you, Sharon. And I just want to make sure I haven't missed anybody. Ah, hi Monica. I missed it. Was you commenting? Hey, sorry. It's not the easiest thing to spot, I have to say, in my screen, but I'll have to see if Ian can adjust it for me. Short-sighted. Terrible. Wish I could use that as an excuse, but I've got my glasses on. Should really be better. Should. Okay, so take care, and I will be back tomorrow at 8 when I will be doing some landscape ones. So those will be quite quick because they're little and little tiny houses. So take care, and if you have any questions about the paints, whether that's the line and wash set that I used or any of the other Derwent palettes, don't be afraid to ask. I also do have the Arteza ones, so I'm familiar with those. Also the Koi watercolours as well, and the Kansai Tambis. Use those as much of these, but I will do a tutorial on those soon. Take care and bye.